If you're like me, then you're probably tired of seeing the same book recommendations over and over again on BookTok and BookTube. To be honest, I'm not really on BookTok. I don't go on TikTok all that often. I very rarely go on that app, but I am on BookTube. Obviously, if you came across this video, you're on BookTube as well. And a lot of us are guilty of recommending the same books over and over again. And if you watch a group of content creators on BookTube, chances are that you're getting the same recommendation from each content creator. I don't know, I've been kind of feeling like branching out a little bit and trying out books that have not necessarily gone viral on TikTok or Instagram or here on YouTube. And I have found some really good books by some really great authors that I wanted to share with you guys in today's video. All of the books that I'm going to mention are 4 stars and up. There's a couple 5-star reads as well that I want to share with you guys. A lot of the books that I'm going to be mentioning in today's video are actually on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read these books at any given time and you don't really have to pay anything on top of your Kindle Unlimited membership. If you don't have Kindle Unlimited, then I'm sure you can find these books at the bookstore or at your local library. But yeah, so let me just jump right into my book recommendations. The first book that I want to talk about is actually a recent read for me, and I just fell in love with this author's writing, and I'm actually going to check out the rest of the series because this book is actually part of a series, and that is A Spinster's Guide to Danger and Dukes by Amanda Collins. I don't know if this is like the final book in the series. I know that it's definitely not the first. I was actually sent this book by Aardvark Book Club. I didn't even know it was part of a series until I finished it, and then I went to rate it on Goodreads. But if you love historical romances, then this is the book for you. This book takes place in the 1800s. It's also a murder mystery. You follow Poppy and the Duke. Poppy's sister is actually being accused of murdering her husband. So Poppy is desperate to prove that her sister is innocent. And then the Duke needs a favor from Poppy. So they arrange a fake relationship, a fake engagement. It's a win-win situation for both of them. The Duke gets his family off his back because they're pressuring him to find someone to marry. And then Poppy gets the Duke's influence and help in proving her sister's innocence. There's a little bit of romantic comedy as well. Actually, there's a lot of romantic comedy, so I would say this is a historical romance slash murder mystery slash romantic comedy. I love Poppy's character because she's very sassy, she's very outspoken, she doesn't let anyone tell her what she needs to do or what she can't do. And the Duke was so lovable as well. Loved his character. They had so much chemistry together. There's a tiny bit of spice. I wouldn't call this the spiciest book ever, but there is a spicy scene in this book, so be aware in case you don't like spice. The writing just flowed really nicely, super easy to read, super fast paced. I was not bored at all. That's why I really like books with multiple plots going on. Like, I love a romance book, but sometimes a book that's just focused on 2 characters' romance can get a little boring. But when a book has romance and then murder mystery and then there's a little bit of comedy in there, it just makes for such a fun and entertaining read. The next book that I want to recommend to you guys is another romantic comedy. It's Royally Rearranged by Emma St. Clair. I read this book I think 2 months ago and I gave it 5 stars. I loved it so much. The 2 main characters were so fun to read. They had so much chemistry and it wasn't spicy at all. I'm not a huge lover of spice in books. A lot of the times the spice can come across as very cringy. You know, I'm just not a fan of that. When I read this book, I was specifically in the mood for a closed-door romance, and this book delivered. I thought it was going to be a 3-star max. I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was just going to be a little palate cleanser as I was in between books, but it turned out to be a 5-star read for me. It's also fake dating. I love fake dating, if you couldn't tell, and it involves a actual princess. So it's a royal romance as well, and it involves a princess who has been told all her life that she's going to marry her best friend. However, her best friend has never been aware of such plans, and when he finds out, he does not want to marry her at all. Even though he loves her, he's not in love with her, so he does not want to go through with the arranged marriage. Obviously, the princess is crushed, but she also needs to marry someone or her chances of becoming queen one day are going to be put in jeopardy. In comes a very sassy Duke who kind of has like a bad boy reputation. He is not really taken seriously in the royal circle. Everyone thinks of him as a party boy, a heartbreaker, a player, but he's been secretly in love with this princess for pretty much his entire life, and everything is not what it seems with this Duke. And he was such a great character. I loved him from the very first chapter he was introduced. I loved his banter with the princess. Their chemistry, like I said, was off the charts. I love them together. If you want a royal romance with no spice, a closed door romance, then this is the book for you. I highly recommend. You're going to be laughing out loud when you read this book, I promise. So freaking good. Last month I actually found a new favorite thriller author. I talked about her in my reading wrap up for August, but if you haven't watched that, then these next 3 book recommendations that I have from her are going to come in handy for the fall season for you, because these 3 thrillers that I'm going to talk about are must reads. Like if you are a thriller fan or a horror fan, then you need to read these books. I don't know how to pronounce this author's last name. It's Noelle Ihli, I-H-L-I. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I'm so sorry, but I fell in love with her writing last month. So I read 3 thrillers from her. I read The Thicket, Run Unread, and Ask for Andrea. The Thicket is actually a horror thriller book. If you are a fan of Halloween and horror movies, then you need to read this book. It takes place in, it's kind of like a horror fest. Like you have a bunch of haunted houses, you have food trucks, corn maze, like all the things that you want to do during the Halloween season. This horror fest in this book has it. It's like huge. In the book, it's one of the top 10 horror fests in the United States. And in the book, there's a serial killer on the loose. And the serial killer takes the opportunity of everyone being dressed up, having costumes, wearing masks to find victims and to kill them in this horror fest. They have trouble catching him because, like I said, everyone who attends this horror fest is basically wearing a costume. So he's able to kill people without being caught. The whole book is actually focused on a group of characters, maybe like 2 characters. And the first character, her brother is actually murdered by the serial killer. She was actually at the haunted house with him, but she left him because they had an argument. With his death, she is left with a lot of survivor's guilt. And then the second character, her name is Taylor, and she basically is attending this horror fest with her friends after the first set of murders have taken place, and she gets caught up in the serial killer's thirst for killing. Like I said, if you're into horror movies and haunted houses and just Halloween vibes, definitely read this book. I read this book mainly at night and I was getting like goosebumps. I was getting a little scared. I'm not even gonna lie. If you want a good scare, read this book with the lights off. I'm sure you're going to be spooked out. It's not like paranormal or anything. It's just so suspenseful that you don't know what's gonna happen next, and you just keep reading to find out if the serial killer is going to get caught, who he's going to kill next. You also get to see the serial killer's point of view as well, which is very interesting. And you also don't know who the serial killer is, which is another fun part of the book. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. It was almost a 5-star read. I wasn't a huge fan of the ending, but I'm hoping there's a second book coming, but definitely a good read. And then another thriller by Noelle is Run Unread. Think of this book as like Wrong Turn. You know those movies where there is like a group of friends or maybe one person on a highway in the middle of nowhere and they get targeted by a serial killer? Run Unread is very similar to that idea, into those tropes, except it involves 2 main characters, 2 female main characters who are driving to a bonfire in the middle of the night. I think it's like 9 o'clock at night. They're running late. The bonfire is in the middle of nowhere, so they don't have any phone signal. This book also takes place in 2006, so keep that in mind. Definitely adds a more suspenseful element to the book because they don't have technology that we have now. But yes, it takes place in 2006. These 2 girls are headed to a bonfire when they get driven off the road by 2 men in a pickup truck, and they basically have to survive the night. They have to try to get away from these 2 men. Very suspenseful. I feel like all of her thrillers are very suspenseful. overall, I gave this book 4 stars, and it feels like you're watching a movie while you're reading this book. And each chapter ends with a cliffhanger, which makes you want to continue reading. So highly recommend. And then the next thriller that I want to recommend from Noelle is Ask for Andrea. This was actually a 5-star read for me. Loved this book. This was a perfect thriller. If you're into suspense thrillers, just read this one. Thank me later. You're going to have such a fun time with this book. So this book follows 3 female main characters who are dead. So you basically get to see their POV as ghosts. All 3 women were murdered by the same serial killer. You get to see them go on a date with said serial killer, and you get to see them being murdered by said serial killer. And the first half of the book, you basically see them cope with their death, and then in the second half of the book, they actually find each other and try to stop the serial killer from killing other women, and they also try to bring justice to their deaths. It's a very interesting read. I've never read a book where the main character was dead. Not only that, but this book involves 3 main characters that are all dead, and they all have to work together as ghosts to bring justice to their deaths. It's a really interesting book. It's also kind of sad because, like I said, you see them be murdered by this serial killer, and they're all young. They all had their lives ahead of them. It just makes you feel sad that their lives were cut short by such an evil human being. You're literally going to be at the edge of your seat with this one. The author just has a way of writing suspense novels that makes you want to read all of her books in one sitting, and they're also very short. They're like less than 300 pages, so you literally will fly through it. The writing is very easy to follow. She doesn't waste time with fillers in her writing. She jumps right into the action in all of her books. You don't have to read chapter after chapter to get to the best part of the book, and then as soon as you're sucked in from the very first chapter, you won't want to put any of her books down. So highly recommend this author for thrillers. I think she only has 4 books. She has 3 that are out, and I think a 4th one is coming out at the end of September or October, which I'm going to download because like I said, I'm obsessed with her writing. I have another series that I want to recommend to you guys, and if you have been watching my channel since the beginning of my booktube content, which I started uploading booktube content I think last February, so it's been over a year, and I used to recommend this series a lot because I loved it so much, and then I stopped recommending it. I don't really know why, but if you like detective, crime solving, murder mysteries type of books, then you're going to love this series, and it is the Detective Josie Quinn series by Lisa Reagan. I love all of these books. I think there's 18 books in this entire series. I've read 14 out of the 18. Absolutely loved every book. I highly suggest starting with book 1 because in every book you get a new mystery that you have to solve with Detective Josie Quinn. Like, there's a new murder in every book. But what I really like about these books is that not only are you getting a murder mystery, but you're also getting a lot of character development with all the characters involved, especially the main character, Detective Josie Quinn. The first book was a 5-star read for me, and a lot of the books in this series are 5 stars for me because the writing hooks you from the very beginning. It's very fast paced. I wouldn't say that her books are super short, but they're not super long either. A lot of the books that I read from her, I read in one sitting. I stayed up late to finish them because I could not put them down, and you can't help but fall in love with Josie Quinn's character. Like, her character is so complex, and she's just such a badass. She really breaks the rules a lot to solve crimes and to solve murders. Very complex character in a very fast-paced, thrilling detective series. So if, again, you're into murder mysteries, detective type of books, and this is the series for you. Just start with book 1. I promise you won't regret it, and you'll be loving Josie Quinn just as much as I love her. I actually need to read the newer releases. I feel like Lisa Reagan publishes these books left and right, and I just can't keep up, but I love all these books so much. Back to romance, I have another fake dating recommendation for you guys. I did not plan on having so many fake dating books in this video, but clearly I have a favorite trope, and I've been reading a lot of fake dating recently. So the next book that I want to recommend to you guys is Faking Miss Right by Claire Kingsley. I actually read this on Kindle Unlimited, and I love this book so freaking much. I ended up giving a 4-star rating, and it's also a office romance. It reminds me a lot of By a Thread by Lucy Score, but low-key better, just because it's not as long as By a Thread. I enjoyed By a Thread, but I felt like the book was way longer than it needed to be, and Faking Ms. Right is just a short and sweet workplace fake dating romance. It's also a romantic comedy, which makes it super fun. The two main characters are very lovable. You actually get a dual POV in this book, so you get Everly's POV and then you get Shepard's POV. Shepard is the male main character. He's a grump. He's also really rich. And then Everly is actually all sunshine. She's the female main character and she's actually Shepard's assistant. Shepard asks Everly to fake date him and to pretend to live with him in order to get someone off his back. Also, Everly needs a favor from Shepard, so she agrees to fake date him. She even moves in with him. It's like a fake engagement and it's a really weird favor. That's one of the things that I didn't really like about the book, was how weird the favor was that she needed from him, but it was still very good. There were a lot of funny parts. If you're into spicy books, then you're going to love this book because the spice is there and it's not cringy. It's not cringy spice. Like, the spice is actually enjoyable, and this is coming from someone that normally hates spice in books, but this one I feel like isn't overdone and it's actually realistic. And the two main characters have so much chemistry. I fell in love with Shepard from the very beginning, and Everly is also very fun. I normally find female main characters in like grumpy sunshine tropes to be very annoying, but she's not. She's just an optimist and she wants to be happy all the time, but she's not annoying about it. She still gets mad, and I just really like her character. Both of them together are just 10 out of 10, and it was just a fun read. It's also not super long, like I said, so you'll be able to finish this in one sitting. Highly recommend if you want to read a romantic comedy. And the final book that I want to recommend to you guys is A Magical New York Christmas by Anita Hughes. And I know this is a Christmas book and it's only September, but the holiday season is right around the corner, so you can save this for December. This was actually one of the first books that got me back into reading. I read this in December before I started uploading booktube content. It was a 5-star read for me. I loved the holiday vibes and the Christmas vibes. It also takes place in New York, and Christmas in New York is just so unique and it's so beautiful. If you haven't experienced Christmas in New York or the holiday season in New York, you have to at least once, because it's just such a magical time in the city. I normally don't like New York City at all. I've been a couple times. I wouldn't say I hate it, but I don't love it. But I've also been during the holiday season, and it's probably my favorite time to go to New York is the holiday season. Even though the crowds are intense, I still think it's worth it. This book follows a struggling journalist who gets the opportunity of a lifetime to be a ghostwriter for a very wealthy man. She actually gets to spend 6 nights, if I remember correctly, in the Plaza Hotel in New York City as she ghostwrites for this wealthy man. And as she spends time in this hotel, she runs into another guest, and he assumes that she's a wealthy guest and that she's staying at the hotel because she can afford it and she has money and all this, when in reality she has no money and she's there because of a job. But she doesn't correct him. She kind of goes along with it. She has to figure out how to break the news to him if he's still going to like her when he finds out the truth. And like I said, the Christmas vibes, the New York vibes, holiday vibes in this book were 10 out of 10. It was just a super cute little love story that takes place around Christmas, and it just brought a smile to my face as I read it. I picked this up at Target. It literally has a sticker. Not really expecting much. I was just in the mood for a holiday romance, and this book delivered. Highly recommend. And the cover is just so pretty. Look at that cover. Those are my like top 8 book recommendations that are not on BookTok or not on BookTube that I know of. I'm going to laugh if these books have actually gone viral on TikTok. I don't think any of them have though. I hope you guys enjoyed these recommendations. I hope you guys check them out and like them as much as I did. And let me know in the comments below of any book recommendations that you have of authors who haven't necessarily gone viral on TikTok. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.